How's it going, everyone? Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Phil Talks Sports. As always, I'm your host, Phil Nunziata. Today is Wednesday, June 10th, and joining me on this episode is, well, no one, actually. For the first time, I'm going to fly solo. I prefer to have guests. I feel like it makes the show better, and I think it makes it, more fun to listen to for you guys out there. But I also didn't plan on making an episode today, but when I woke up and as the day rolled on, there was just more sports news I thought that was worth talking about. So I'm flying solo today, as I said. Might come off the rails, it might not, but we're going to go on this journey. Let's see how this does just by myself. I will still predominantly have guests in the future, but it'll be good to know that I can, pull the wagon by myself when needed. So the big news of today, when I first woke up, the news was the MLS has announced its return. It will be back on July 8th, so just under a month from now, before the NBA, of course. And they are going about things a little bit differently, as when you think about it, it really was a whole nother challenge for the MLS. The NBA is looking for a way to finish its season, whereas the MLS had just started. They were 2 weeks in their season. So they are looking at things from the beginning, whereas the NBA is just trying to, to some extent limp to the finish line. So it was a whole nother set of challenges, so I applaud them for, not just doing what the NBA did, because it's a completely different scenario. So what they're actually going to do to kind of kick their season back off is something called the Mls Is Back Tournament. Great name, right? I know. But it still lets you know what the deal is. So what it is every team in the league, all 26 teams, will be in a kind of World Cup style tournament is the best way I'll put it for now. I'll explain later. All 26 teams will be put into 6 groups. And there will be what's known as kind of a group stage. If you're familiar with the World Cup, they will start out with a group stage of it. And the 6 teams that were basically the playoff teams from last year, and Orlando, because this will be in Orlando, where all the World of Sports is where this is going to be hosted, will be the group leaders. Each team will play 3 games in this group stage, which I'm pretty sure the World Cup is 4. Someone could correct me on that. I should probably know that. But in these groups, there will be 3 Eastern Conference teams and 3 Western Conference teams. The 2 top finishers in each group will move on to the knockout stage, and the 4 best third-place finishes in these groups will also move on. That part's a little confusing. I'm sure as the tournament goes on, that'll become more clear. So it's basically a mini World Cup, and the other thing is during this group stage where everybody will be playing, those records will count in the regular season, because when the tournament is over, they will then resume a regular season. So only the games in that group stage is going to count towards the regular season, which makes sense. That way every team is playing the same amount. Otherwise, you got the teams in the knockout rounds are going to play extra games, and it'd get confusing. So the knockout rounds will just kind of become another tournament. At that point, it almost becomes like the Open Cup, U.S. Open Cup, which I'm not sure is happening this year at this rate. Wouldn't be shocked if it wasn't. So the knockout rounds, the round of 16 will be the weekend of July 25th through the 28th. The quarterfinals will be July 30th through August 1st. Semifinals will be August 5th through the 6th, and then I believe the finals is on August 11th or 12th. So this whole thing takes place, in just a few months. It's really a good way to kick things off, kind of lets the teams almost catch up to where they were before as far as matches that they should have been playing. So I'm excited for this. Obviously, I assume no crowd. This hasn't been specified, but I think any of these leagues that are coming back on, they're not going to have fans in the beginning. I think that's pretty well understood. And for those wondering what are the other group leading teams aside from Orlando, who, let's be honest, it's good for me being an Orlando fan and other people. The only reason is because they are the quote-unquote host city, obviously, so that makes sense. But as far as for the remaining 5 teams, it really has more to do with their standings from last year. Atlanta will lead a group since they were in the semifinals of the playoffs last year. Same with Toronto FC. LAFC also made it to the semifinals. Let's see here. Seattle Sounders is also going to lead a group, and Real Salt Lake, because they had the next highest points total in the Western Conference from last year. So that's how they decided all that. Not that really doesn't have a thing for obviously home field advantage, but it's more for who's going to be the top team in each group, and everything else will kind of file suit after that. So I'm definitely excited. This is almost, as I said, a U.S. Open Cup with a twist. So it's definitely, every single game is going to be on television. You won't have, that's the one thing with the Open Cup early on. You get some of these, outlandish and smaller arenas that you can't even find a live stream of. If you're lucky. You're lucky if someone posts something on an Instagram story about some of these games. So you don't have to worry about that with this. I think it's 54 total games will be played to get everyone back on track, and then from there we just keep rolling into the regular season, and maybe they will, depending on where we are in the world at that point, they'll look into adding fans. I know there is New Japan Pro Wrestling, to go off kilter a little bit, has announced they're coming back July 15th, and for the first couple shows they're going to do like WWE and AEW has been doing, but they have, at the end of July, they're going to experiment with a show at 1/3 capacity. So from what I understand, that's the first major sporting venue and event that's going to attempt fans in at all. So that'll be something I'll be keeping my eye on, one, because I love New Japan Pro Wrestling, and because it'll be interesting to be the first major league with the crowd back, even if it is 1/3 capacity. To me, that sounds like maybe the ground floor, or maybe they want to distance it and they do like that middle bowl of arenas or something like that. So that'll be interesting, and obviously, as long as an MLS season normally is, I would not be shocked, especially to see what the NFL does and college football. I could see fans in the stands towards the end of the season, and hopefully for the normal MLS Cup playoffs. I'm pretty sure the winner of this whole thing is gonna get a Champion League spot. It'll probably take the place of the U.S. Open Cup, which, the more I think about it, I'm pretty convinced it's not happening. So that's another good thing for the MLS, to make sure that spot, that they worked hard to carve out for themselves in America, will still be there. So overall, I'm excited about this. Like I said, it starts in about a month, and teams have already gotten back to individual workouts and are, I think, if not already, pretty close to just, normal training and practice to get back in shape. So they have a whole nother month to do that. To me, this seems a little more ready to go than the NBA. I mean, I feel like there's a lot more admin going on in the NBA, and obviously, like I said, they had a whole other set of challenges. Their goal is to just finish the season. Same with the NHL. They've decided a whole nother, they even foregoed whatever was left in their regular season, and when they get going, they're jumping right into the playoffs. So each one of these sports has figured out the way they were most comfortable and what they thought would be the best for their league moving forward. And really, the only sport that this is bad for is now everyone's looking at you, Major League Baseball, because they have kind of, flattened this thing, and they are not even, both sides are, it is kind of difficult to talk about on my own, but like this, if there's one sport I would be shocked if we see in 2020 at this rate, it is Major League Baseball. And I think it's all but decided that there will be no minor league baseball this year, which, as someone who works in minor league baseball usually during the summer, that's a pretty big hit for me. Whether financially and just I love working at that ballpark. So, I mean, that's something I'm kind of coming to terms with as these weeks and months go on. But Major League Baseball, to me, it's just a bad look. I mean, these sides, both the Players Association and the owners, are sending these proposals back and forth. And it's not like when the NFL had their lockouts or the NBA. Like, somebody would send a proposal and they'd at least get a counter proposal. These days, they're sending one and they are not even... the one they send back is completely different. They are like almost not even letting themselves look at the other guy's proposal. So it's getting pretty petty. I mean, you've seen 114 game seasons. You've seen 86 game seasons. You've seen I think the owners got really petty, and they're just like, oh, let's play a 60 game season. Like, I've always been in the camp that the baseball season is way too long, but I think 60, you can't go from 162 to 60. It's just not going to work that way. I think somewhere in the 80s is probably the way to go for this. I mean, I think in the future, I'd love to see, I mean, I'm not what you'd call a baseball purist, so like Kramer and other people that are on this show and other baseball fanatics wouldn't agree with me here, but like, I would love to just see a nice and even 100-game season years down the road. Will that ever happen? Probably not, but I mean, from where I sit, I think that'd be great. It'd make all the games mean a little more. I think we'd be lucky if we even get down to like the 130, 140 range in the future. Because it's always been talked about, similar as the NBA with the whole, let's get rid of conferences and just seed 1 through 16. It's always talked about, never really is said. This virus and these shutdowns of these leagues have kind of opened them up to think a little more than they normally would, a little more creatively, as me and Nick talked about when we talked about the NBA coming back last episode. So maybe it'll be brought back up, but I'm going to come on record and say that I'd be shocked if the MLB comes back in any capacity. It seems like the one sport that doesn't have it together, and I'm not even convinced they necessarily want it to. They, at the rate we're going, they might just leave it alone and kick back next year. Maybe start, spring training a little earlier and let people, I don't know what, but like they seem they almost seem content not playing this year. And if that's how you feel, that's fine. That's fine, Major League Baseball, but let people know. Let people know that, hey, this is not really, at the rate we're at now, we don't really think coming back is the best bet, whether it's the safety of the players, and if it's that, nobody can really blame them. But as all these other leagues are starting to come out and find other ways to do it, it seems that there is a safe way to do this. Every major sport in America, the NFL and college football haven't even really flinched. I mean, college football has allowed their athletes back on campus. You see some, two guys on this team, 3 guys on this team tested positive for the virus. That you're going to expect that when you get 50 people together and obviously testing positive for it, being asymptomatic, and actually being ill from the virus are all 3 different things. That's one thing that frustrates me about the news and everything with this is they don't specify what they mean by that. If somebody is positive with the virus, that could mean any of those things. They could be, extremely ill, they could just test positive, or they could have they're asymptomatic and they could pass on to someone else. So I don't know if these tests necessarily tell you that right off the bat, so that could be the reason that these things aren't being said. But, college football and the NFL haven't really seemed to be flinching all that much. I think their season, I have a lot more faith in that going on. I think their biggest question will be, in the fall if they'll have fans. And I think that's the only big question for the NFL. I don't think anybody has questioned if the NFL is happening at this rate. So, between them not flinching, MLS, hockey and NBA, all getting back in gear. This just seems like a black eye on Major League Baseball. This was something that they had the opportunity. If they would have pulled this off, they would have had the whole world in their hands, because they almost had an opportunity to be the first sport back. I mean, the first sport back in the world was, of course, that Korean baseball organization that I did catch a few games of when it first came out. So, they could have been, I don't know if they'd be playing, maybe spring training. I think if they had handled this right, there could have been some exhibition games played by now, and people would have been glued to their television, because the people that like baseball love baseball. It might not be as many as it used to be, and it might not be as diehard and loud and crazy as football fans and hockey fans, but the people that like baseball love it. And if you would have been able to come back and been the first thing to emerge out of all this, I think you would have made some new fans in the process. You didn't. And now you're going to have to, reap the consequences, I guess. So I'm just on record saying that I'd be very shocked if Major League Baseball came back this year. But as far as the NHL, the NBA, and now the MLS, I'm excited to see them all come back. Obviously, they're going to be in different, forms than we're used to seeing them, and I'm okay with that. This year was never going to be normal. I think that's one thing that baseball has not allowed itself to understand, is that, they almost want it to be as normal as possible. All these other leagues are like, look, we know this is a little far-fetched. We know we're kind of digging deep here a little bit, but you guys want games, right? And, of course, everyone shakes their head, yes. So this is how they're doing it. So, I don't mind that it's not a normal season. Some people think, the winners of these tournaments and championships and regular seasons, they'll have some asterisks to them. It's like everyone's dealt the same card, the same hand. It's not like, 1 or 2 teams are affected by this. It's not like if this thing would have been only in California and New York, and those were top level teams in any league right now, that these teams, the reason they didn't do as well is because what was going on in their respective cities. This is countrywide. This is worldwide. So it's not like these teams aren't all playing with the same hands trying to get it going here. So I think it's as even as it's going to be for seasons like the NBA and the NHL that had most of their season played. They are looking at ways to reward the teams that were the highest seed before everything went back. The MLS and baseball wouldn't have had this problem, and I think that's why MLS was like, well, based off of last year's records, we were only 2 weeks into the damn thing, so it's not like you can base it off of, everyone's either 1-1, 1-0-1, or 1-1-1. So I think I said that right, but you know what I mean. There's only 3 possible records you could have. I guess you could be 2-0 also, so 4 different kinds. So that's not really an issue here, and the Major League Baseball doesn't even have that issue the way NBA and NHL did, and they were able to figure it out. They've always been moving. They've had their feet moving on this the entire time. They were able to find, I don't know if the NHL has an actual date. I know for basketball it's now July 31st, so, I think they pushed it back. They could have done the MLS. They could have did early July or even mid-July. They decided, let's give them an extra week to get going, get healthy, make sure, which is fine. I mean, at this point, we've waited how long for the season to end? We can wait another 2 weeks. So, overall, I'm very happy with how these leagues have been conducting themselves, except for you, baseball. Shame on you. So anyways, now we're going to pivot to, I guess you can call this college football news. This is just football news in general. But this is another headline that came out today, a couple hours ago now. Reggie Bush and USC has ended their disassociation with each other, which, when I saw that word, I'm like, it just seems very pompous way to go about it. After 10 years, Reggie Bush is now associated with his alma mater again, which, again, is just a weird thing to say. For people that don't know, Reggie Bush, one of the greatest running backs in college football history, easily one of the greatest at USC, was, again, disassociated from the school after his parents, I forgot if it was money to buy a house or a house itself. It was something to that effect. Had I waited to do this, I would have probably had a USC fan on and would have explained a little more. But most people know the story by now, so it's a 10-year-old story. So spoiler alert. So he's been hired as the director of the director of athletics for USC, which, I mean, I've heard of athletic director. I don't know if it's exactly the same thing. I know prior to this, USC has been pretty good about hiring former great players. I think Lynn Swann was the athletic director until mid last year. And basically because of the poor performance of the football team was let go. And I don't know if he's necessarily taking that job, but to me this just seems like a weird time. I mean, no USC fan has ever had a negative thing to say with Reggie Bush at this point. He's not someone that they don't have. The only other group of people I can really compare this to is the Fab Five guys at Michigan. And that's another group that were disassociated from their school. Their banners were taken down. USC never took it that far, obviously, because it's one guy on a team, as opposed to with Michigan, it was the entire starting lineup of a championship-reaching team and going to the Final Four and things of that nature. So they never took down banners and stuff. His Heisman Trophy was vacated, which I always thought was one of the dumbest things, to vacate wins in college football and championships, unless you get like a Houston Astros situation or a New England Patriots situation, that it's like program wide, coaches wide, players wide. If you can prove that sort of a thing, because you can't just do it off of like illegal recruits and stuff. Because let's be honest, almost everyone's done it. So I think a lot of this also comes down to the whole name and likeness thing that's been kind of creeping towards the finish line here with college football, and it's basically they didn't want to be caught with their hands out when this becomes a norm, and you're like, why is one of the greatest players in your program's history no longer allowed on your campus? Why is his Heisman Trophy taken away? Or, which I believe he has his version. I think the school just got rid of the one that they would display among the other Heisman Trophy winners that they have. So to me, it's good for Reggie Bush. I think he never really had ill will towards his school. I mean, he went there for a reason, and I think he always wanted to be in good graces with his alma mater, and I think now he gets to do that. I think a lot of people, this is also a non-story in the sense that fans and anyone that watched back then, or even if you didn't, when greatest college football players come up, he's in the conversation. He's at least top 10 to anyone. I'm about to be 28 in next week. Anyone my age and a little older and a little younger really is going to tell you, he's a top 10 player that they've ever seen. And of course he goes to the NFL, and he kind of became this new level of guy that he was not necessarily as great in college. He was not a bust by any means. He was a very, very good player. He's a Super Bowl champion. Towards the end, he, of course, had some not-so-favorable years that he could have, probably just hung it up, and his overall pro-level career would have probably been looked at a little better, but I don't think people take that away from him. I think his time with the Saints will forever overshadow anything else he did, I think, towards the end with the Dolphins, and I think he was on one or two other teams that I'm not really thinking about right now. But I think his time with the Saints is really, when you think of Reggie Bush, if you're an NFL fan, that's how you look at it. You look at him being a Super Bowl champion with them, and of course he was, one of their better players, if not their best player, obviously having Drew Brees and really good receivers back in those days. But he'll be remembered as it was with the Bills that he had his really bad year. The Dolphins was actually not that bad. He had an okay year with the Lions. He played for the Niners. I'd be honest, I didn't remember that one necessarily. He's in the Saints Hall of Fame. Two-time national champion. He's been an all-pro. He's won every award you can win as a running back in college. And, of course, the Heisman Trophy would, I'd assume, be unvacated at this point if it hasn't already. I mean, I remember the big story when they they had to return the trophy to the Heisman committee, which I don't know if there's any other vacated Heisman ever. I don't know if he's the first, but I think it's safe to say he's going to get that back. And as a player that, I'm not a USC guy. I'm not like a homer, even when they were world beaters back then. I enjoyed watching them play, but I was never necessarily rooting for them to win. But Reggie Bush is easily one of the more exciting players I've ever seen watch. So for him if this means something to him, then I'm happy. If it's something that the university is doing to save face before these sort of things become the norm, of a guy that, because if these rules were in place back then, Reggie Bush could have done 3 autograph signings and bought his family a house in LA. He was that popular back then. They were the king of the world. You got to remember, back in these days, in the early 2000s, LA did not have the, plethora of football teams they had. USC was the de facto pro team. It almost, back when the Raiders were in LA, when they were winning Super Bowls, like that was it. It was Raiders or nobody. Obviously the Raiders were gone, the Rams were gone, the Chargers were in San Diego, which I think they should still be. That's another conversation for another day. They weren't really considered like LA guys. Vegas didn't have hockey yet. Like, if you lived in this area, USC was where it was at. If I had Nick on right now, I think he could probably tell you that. I'm sure he would have grown up with plenty of USC memories and such. So, if those rules were in place that he could have made money off his name and likeness, he would have done 2 Gatorade commercials, a couple autograph signings, and whatever money or benefits the school had illegally given him, I think he would have had on his own anyway. So I never considered him a bad person. Very few of these things do I look at these kids, and I guess I can call them kids now because I'm older than college football age, but I've never looked at any of these and be like, oh, what a jerk, what a bum, he shouldn't have done this. Like, we don't know all these guys' stories, so it's not really something I've ever bothered, unless it's, I wasn't alive for the SMU situation, but if it's just top to bottom, guys on a payroll, Eric Dickerson taking a pay cut to go to the NFL, death penalty was a bit outstanding, but overall I understood where they were coming from. So anything short of that, if a player took some money to go to this school in Texas as opposed to this school in Texas, like, at that point he still has to play, because if you're not playing well, these kind of things are gonna no longer be provided for you, I would assume, and you can't exactly tell on anybody. It's illegal to begin with, so it really did become a very weird situation. Most people, I think, felt for Reggie in this situation, and if this is something that matters to him, then I'm happy for him. If it's just something, and I mean, I didn't realize that he was actually given a position there. I thought it was like with the Fab Five with Michigan. Obviously, they hired Juwan Howard as their coach, but as far as the other guys, they for the first time were allowed like in the building, and I don't know if they put their banners back up or not. So that was a big deal, obviously. Other than Juwan, though, the other guys were just kind of, okay, we are acknowledging that you played here, which is something you should have always done, because that was one of the more successful times in Michigan basketball history. Same with, USC being a little different. They had plenty of peaks and valleys, plenty of championships, plenty of Heisman winners. They kind of felt that if they swept this under the rug, they still had plenty of history to hang their hat on. And I think that was, whenever this decision came, it's like, yeah, it was going to suck, but, USC is still USC without Reggie Bush, to an extent, but I think he's one of the more well-known Trojans, one of the more successful Trojans, and this is good news for him. Kind of a weird timing thing, I guess. They wanted to fill. I don't know how long this has been going back and forth, but Reggie Bush taking a position, director of athletics, athletic director. I assume they're the same thing. Never really heard it said in that form, but congratulations to Reggie Bush, and we'll see if he can help a very average USC team right now. Let's see if he's able to. I don't know if that's going to help with recruiting. I don't know exactly, what his goals will be. Obviously, when you're the director of athletics, that extends more to football. Like, he could have been the football operations guy. He could have, if he was only going to focus on the football program. But when you get a title like this, that means you're there to help all sports across everything, from women's golf to football to basketball to softball to tennis to anything that USC would have, and then it's now into your jurisdiction. So I think that's one of the issues with some of these places hiring like a great football player or a great basketball player at anything higher than a coach of that sport is every sport except for the one that they played can get neglected. And maybe that happened under Lynn Swann. That could be why he was gone. But obviously the football team also not doing well up to that point. They were okay. I mean, the Sam Darnold years were all right. They did win a Rose Bowl. But it was immediately after he left that it came crashing down, and it hurt inside. Some will get that joke, some won't. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how he handles this role, and is it a do-nothing job? Is it just an olive branch? Is it something that, Is it like magic with the Lakers? Is it going to be, once he realized the work involved that he didn't really want to be there and he was out? So I think Reggie Bush, if this relationship with this school means anything to him, he will do his best if it's a job, again, that actually requires work and it's not just an olive branch do-nothing mafia job, then I guess we'll see. But overall, happy for Reggie Bush. Again, if it matters to him, then I'm happy. Okay, so last bit of news for today. Some of you might recall a couple episodes ago, I had a little gushing affair with the UFC. They put on three fight cards in 8 days, and I watched, I'd say, 2 of them, and had a lot of fun. It was one of the best, top to bottom shows I'd ever seen. And prior to that happening, that all took place in Jacksonville with no fans and stuff. Dana White was talking about a Fight Island. He said, "I will go buy an island and have my guys fight there if I need to." And to me, Dana White is getting to the point where he's just a couple notches under Vince McMahon as far as the level of crazy, and this is a good crazy. He will get shit done if needed. So that came out, and then Florida kind of opened up, and they ended up in Jacksonville, same as AEW. It's definitely a hub for things currently, so it's definitely good for the city of Jacksonville, I'd assume. But the Fight Island talk kind of went away there for a bit. He's had a couple of fights, couple pay-per-views, couple fight nights, and it's all worked out pretty well. The one issue is the non-American and Canadian fighters, non-North American fighters, we'll say, hasn't been able to participate on any of these cards. So the Fight Island thing came back up, and it appears that Dana White has purchased Fight Island. It's in Abu Dhabi. It's, I guess, I don't know if he straight up just threw a stack of money on a table and now owns an island. I'm sure there's a little more to it than that, but the news came out, it was either late last night or today, that over the next 2 weeks, July 11th, 15th, 18th, and 25th, UFC will be appearing from Fight Island. And at first I didn't really get it. I'm like, you're already having shows. If the world was still locked like a drum and you wanted to have fights still, I'd understand doing this, but at first I didn't get, you're already in Jacksonville, you're already pumping out banger fight cards, why does it matter? And I actually had discussion with somebody over Twitter about this, and what they basically said was it's so the foreign fighters can start participating. So I don't know if after this Fight Island, if we're going to go back and forth between, you might have a show in Jacksonville, you might have a show here, I don't know. It's funny, the first image they posted about it looks like an octagon smack dab on the middle of a beach. I assume this is still an indoor venue, at least in one of those bubble tents or something. If it's out open on a beach with the waves crashing and, seagulls flying around, that's going to be can't miss TV. So I will definitely have to check out one of these Fight Island shows. I don't think all of them are pay-per-view. I know UFC, 251 is definitely a pay-per-view that's going to be here. I think the others might just be a lead-up fight night card stuff you'd catch on ESPN+. So that's something that I'm going to be interested to see how it works. If it ends up just being a building on an island and it looks just like the Jacksonville shows, then it's just going to be a matter of, how good are the fights when they get going. But if it's anything more gimmicky than that, I'll be interested to see. I think Amanda Nunes is on the 251 card. I saw some of the fights. I didn't have time to read them all now. But overall, sports are really picking up steam. I think they're rolling that ball up the cliff, and pretty soon we're going to hit the peak, and we're going to be off and rolling. Less than a month, really, or about a month, I guess you could say at this point, for real major sports going, not just combat sports, team sports, and everything else. And I'm looking forward to it. For any sports fans out there, we did it. We've gotten through the worst of it, I think, unless things take a drastic turn in the world and the health of the world. Things are going to, pick back up, and hopefully in the next episode or two, we'll be talking about when is it going to be okay to bring fans in. And with soccer, I think might be the first one, being that it's outside. I think the NBA is prepared to do their entire tournament, playoff tournament without fans. I think they're prepared to do that. I think they would love to, maybe the conference finals or the finals, if things are okay, open those up to fans in Disney World. Same with the MLS, obviously, the championship game maybe, or when you get to the knockout rounds. You got to think, all this has happened in 2 to 3 months. The world went from normal to, hell on earth to somewhat normal. All this happened in about, 2.5 months. So when these playoffs are coming to an end, it's another 2.5 months. So when you look at it, some people think I'm being a little too optimistic. It's a lot changed in 2 months, and a lot more can change 2 months later down the road. Granted, both positively and negatively, I feel you on that, but what I'm saying is anything can happen in the next 2 months. I don't think we're going to be packed stadiums in 2 months. I would never think that, but I would not be shocked if some of these leagues find a way to have a small amount of fans. A third, like New Japan, is going to attempt in July sometime. I mean, you look at where some of these guys, these NBA guys, are warming up in gyms, either at their old high schools or wherever, I don't think they're doing like Rucker Park or any of those kind of places, but you look at some of these videos on these guys' Instagrams, and these places are packed. I mean, it looks like, there's people around, there's bleachers, and then there's people wrapped around the courts. There's people out and about doing these sort of things, and I think, I do think that the outside venues might have a better opportunity to bring people together, because you can kind of distance and be out in the open air, and it probably helps than getting people in a bubble, quite literally in some cases. So I don't know, maybe MLS will be the first with fans. That'd be a big get for them. And, if baseball came back, I think it'd be great, because those parks are big enough. We've seen plenty of games, mid-season, dog days of baseball, day or night games, where you hit a home run into the stands and there's not a guy anywhere near it to catch it, like in the stands. Like, there's maybe, there might be a couple thousand people, but as big as these stadiums are, it looks like a couple hundred. Like, there are definitely going to be ways to social distance these guys in some of these venues. So who knows? I mean, at first I'm just happy to get the fans or the sports back, and I think we can talk about the fans at a later date. But overall, I just wanted to get this episode out, and I hope everyone enjoyed. Hope the MLS situation makes sense. I know a few people told me that our explanation of the NBA return really helped them figure it out. They didn't need a whiteboard and putting strings of yarn together to figure it out, so that's good. So I think that's going to wrap it up for today, guys. My name is Phil Nunziata. This has been Phil Talk Sports, and thank you for listening if it's been on YouTube and Apple Podcast. And the other big announcement I had earlier in the week is I'm now on Spotify. So if you're listening to this on Spotify, thank you. You're probably one of the first. So those are going to be the main platforms going forward. I have one other that I'm kind of pending with. I don't know if it's going to go through. We'll see. If so, that'll be announced. But for now, I think these are going to be the three main ways. And I'm going to look into, kind of pumping out more of these. I used to aim for one a month. I want to at least double that, and hopefully, I don't think I'm ever going to go to one a week, but I think every other week could happen. I think that'd be good. So whether it's been on YouTube, Apple Podcast, or Spotify, I want to thank you guys for listening, and I'll catch you next time.